Laurie Garrett is on the line with us right now. CFR.org is her website. Laurie is the Senior Fellow for Global Health at the Council on Foreign Relations, Pulitzer Prize-winning writer. Her book, which I read years ago, and Laurie's been on the show about, it's been a few years, I believe, The Coming Plague, Newly Emerging Diseases in a World Out of Balance, and Betrayal of Trust, The Collapse of Global Public Health. Absolutely must-reading, brilliant stuff. And she's the author of the new Newsweek cover story, Fear and the Flu, at the New Age of Pandemics. Laurie Garrett, welcome to the show.
Hi.
Or welcome back.
Yeah.
Great talking with you. I've been in fact, I was reading on the flight back from Anchorage yesterday, I forget what publication it was, that in 1918 there was a pretty nasty flu that circulated in the summer of 1918, but it didn't kill many people. Nobody thought much of it. And then, of course, it came back that fall and just whacked folks. And the same thing happened, as I recall, in, was it 57?
It's pretty much been the norm with these really nasty pandemics that the first wave, as far as we know, of those for which we have viral samples that we can actually analyze, the first wave tends to be milder than the second wave. And it's probably because the virus circulates around the world, goes through more and more human beings, pigs, chickens, whatever, and in the process it's mutating and changing and gaining new capacities, and that's the second round is when it seems to really know what it's doing.
It acquires virulence.
It acquires virulence, or the other option is, let's take the H1N1 we're looking at right now that everybody's calling a swine flu. Well, we know it was first circulating in pigs and probably for a very long time. And in the process, it is best adapted to the receptors on the cells of pig cells. But the more it circulates in human beings, the better it adapts to human cell receptors and becomes a more powerful microbe spreading amongst humans.
Right. So, do you feel comfortable predicting that this fall we're going to have a really nasty flu, at least maybe not a pandemic or an epidemic, but certainly a really nasty, that this H1N1 is going to come back with a vengeance?
Well, you phrase it, do you feel comfortable? No, I don't.
No, I didn't. You know what I mean. As a scientist.
No, I don't feel comfortable
or as a writer.
with prediction as a rule, because microbes are evolving, and they're constantly adapting and changing. And anybody who thinks, any human being who thinks they know what the viruses are up to with any kind of certainty is probably talking through their hat. What I would say is, it would be extremely unlikely, way low on the probability scale, for us to hit September, October, November and not see the virus come back. Right. Now the question is, would it come back in a worse form or a milder form? Right. You know, you have to prepare for the worst and hope that you're going to get screamed at for, crying wolf because nothing bad comes.
Well, isn't there sort of an odd, almost a non sequitur to the evolution of viruses, and I think Ebola is a good example of this, that the more virulent they become, or at least the shorter the gestation time is in the body, and the more lethal they are, the harder it is for them to spread because they kill their hosts before they have an opportunity to spread. Whereas those viruses like the HIV virus, which is very lethal, but it takes a long, long time to reach lethality, if that's a word, spread more widely and arguably more rapidly, even though it's very, very difficult to transmit the HIV virus. So the probability, doesn't that mean that if that's the case, if that setup is the case, and do a reality check with me on that, then doesn't that argue that the highest probability is that the virus will come back more transmissible but less virulent?
Well, as a general rule, you are correct, and your interpretation is correct. However, one of the things that has made influenza a real scourge for humanity for millennia, as far as we know, it's been traveling along with our species for, at least thousands of years.
Yeah.
Is that in fact, it is capable of being extremely transmissible before the individual realizes that he or she is sick. So, for example, I was in the SARS epidemic in China, and what we ultimately did that brought the SARS epidemic down and that worked was that you just had to monitor human beings for temperature. Mm-hmm. And if you just set everybody aside who had a fever, sure, you'd capture people who didn't have SARS, but you would capture all the SARS people.
Right.
Which what I'm saying.
I do, but which raises a question that has been really nagging on my mind, and you, Laurie Garrett, are probably the only person I know who would have the answer. How did we stop SARS? SARS was a coronavirus. It was the same kind of the same family of viruses as the common cold, which I thought were even more more easily transmitted than flu viruses, and it went worldwide. And yet we stopped it. Were the conspiracy theory stories at the time of entire cities being quarantined and people being actually they even went so far as some of them to say some people were being killed off and whatnot in China just to prevent the spread of this thing? Was it something like that, or was the virus an anomaly that was more easily treated? And why can't we do with the flu virus what we did with SARS?
So it's a two-parter here.
Yeah, it is.
The first part is, why didn't fever checking and everything work for flu, and therefore why is this whole sort of rule of thumb of the relationship between how contagious something is and how virulent something is not necessarily applied for flu?
Right.
Answer, people are very contagious before they have fevers with flu. And in fact, one of the things that we're finding very distressing about H1N1, even though it's a mild flu, fortunately, is that for a lot of people, the key symptoms are not normal flu symptoms. It's mostly gastrointestinal, and they're getting diarrhea and so on.
Oh, interesting.
Which sets up a whole other chain of possible transmission.
Sure,
but in the case
particularly in the third world.
Yes, but in the case of SARS, here's what happened. First of all, you were only contagious when you already had a pretty high fever. That meant you didn't have a lot of people just sort of walking around carrying SARS because they were darn sick.
Right.
And the main places where transmission happened were inside hospitals.
Right. So this was that classic example of virulence, high virulence equals low transmissibility because of you're knocking off the host, basically, or you're knocking down the host in this case.
And the way China brought it under control, and I'm one of the only reporters I know of that actually got out there and saw it out in the countryside, is that they basically decided, all right, we lied and we tried to cover it up and none of that worked. We're going to have to fess up. We're going to have to tell the world we got this problem. And since we couldn't control the movement of our populations and 400,000 plus people got the heck out of Dodge as soon as we made the announcement and headed out to the countryside, all we can do is decide our entire country is possibly infected and set up roadblocks everywhere, set up fever check stations everywhere, basically submit the entire population to many times a day fever checks. And if you had a fever, we're not going to waste a lot of time figuring out why you have a fever.
Right.
You know?
We're just going to isolate you. But that only works with a disease where a person isn't contagious until they have the fever. And you said with this flu, people are contagious before they get any symptoms. And I understand that people are also shedding viruses up to 5 days after the end of their symptoms.
Well, and a heck of a lot of the people who are shedding virus never really get symptoms. They never feel that lousy. That's one of our problems with flu every year. So the word containment in the context of containing flu
is
we should just take that word out.
Yeah, it's just silly. Laurie, we have less than a minute left. What should we do?
Well, if I were in the policy-making decision right now, I would have no choice but to risk that everybody would yell at me for crying wolf months from now, but I have to operate on the assumption that something nasty will come and be prepared.
So, in other words, generate millions of flu vaccine doses?
Vaccines, drug supplies, making sure that all my local health departments know what to do, working with our hospital systems to make sure we have enough masks. We've actually run out of masks. We are in a desperate need. Japan's run out of masks.
Right.
We have to escalate sterile mask and syringe
Should people
production.
try to catch the flu now so that they have immunity this fall?
I've heard a lot of people saying that. No, we don't really have any guarantee that it would protect you.
Okay. Laurie Garrett, she is the expert. Fear and the Flu, The New Age of Pandemics in Newsweek, and of course her books, which are The Coming Plague and Betrayal of Trust. The Coming Plague, absolutely brilliant. Laurie, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
And over at the Council on Foreign Relations, CFR.org. It's the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be right back.